Welcome to Mr. Night Scare, where the line between reality and nightmare fades. This is your destination for horror, true crime, and the sinister stories of serial killers that have left their mark on history. Here, we don't just tell stories, we pull you into the dark depths of the human mind. From infamous killers like Ted Bundy and Aileen Wuornos to unsolved mysteries that still haunt investigators, every tale we explore will leave you questioning the world around you. Are you ready to uncover the chilling truth? To walk through the shadows of terror, where evil lurks in the most unexpected places? Lock your doors, dim the lights, and prepare yourself. Because these stories aren't just meant to scare, they're meant to stay with you. With every video, we unravel a different nightmare, one chilling detail at a time. This is more than a channel, it's a journey into fear, suspense, and the unexplainable. Welcome to Mr. Night Scare. The truth is darker than you think. Along the murky banks of the Green River in Washington state, a grim discovery shook the community. It was July 1982 when the first bodies surfaced. Young women stripped of life, discarded like refuse. What followed was the unmasking of one of America's most prolific serial killers. This is the story of Gary Ridgway, a man who eluded justice for decades, confessing to 49 murders, but suspected of many more. Step into the darkness as we unravel the mind of the Green River Killer and the relentless pursuit of justice that finally ended his reign of terror. Gary Leon Ridgway was born on February 18, 1949, in Salt Lake City, Utah. Raised in a dysfunctional household, Gary's early life was riddled with troubling signs of the monster he would become. His father, Tom Ridgway, worked as a bus driver and was often absent, while his mother, Mary, dominated the household with her controlling and obsessive nature. Mary's behavior went beyond strict parenting. She would berate and humiliate Gary, even into his teenage years. One particularly disturbing detail is that she would bathe him well into adolescence, a practice that likely contributed to his unhealthy relationship with women later in life. Ridgway's childhood was marred by violence and behavioral issues. At a young age, he exhibited all three traits of the McDonald triad: bedwetting, arson, and cruelty to animals. These behaviors are often considered early warning signs of psychopathy. When Gary was 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy in the woods, an act of violence that would later foreshadow his adult crimes. The boy survived, and Ridgway dismissed the attack as curiosity. Academically, Ridgway struggled, graduating high school at 20 years old with a poor GPA. He was socially awkward, often the target of bullying. Despite his difficulties, he found ways to mask his darker tendencies. His religious mother often forced him to attend church, and Gary appeared outwardly devout, even later becoming a frequent attendee of Bible studies. The Green River murders began in the summer of 1982 when the body of 16-year-old Wendy Lee Caulfield was found in the Green River near Seattle, Washington. Over the next several months, the bodies of other young women began to surface, each case bearing chilling similarities. The victims were predominantly sex workers or runaways, making them vulnerable and less likely to be reported missing immediately. Ridgway targeted women he deemed easy prey, often luring them into his truck under the guise of paying for sex. Once isolated, he would strangle them with his bare hands or use ligatures such as rope or belts. After killing his victims, Ridgway would dispose of their bodies in wooded areas, dumping several victims in clusters to confuse investigators. His chilling ritual included revisiting the crime scenes to engage in necrophilic acts, claiming it was easier than seeking new victims. As the bodies piled up, panic spread throughout King County. Local law enforcement, under immense pressure, launched the Green River Task Force, a dedicated team of investigators tasked with finding the killer. Despite their efforts, the lack of DNA technology and the transient nature of the victims made progress painfully slow. By 1983, the body count had risen to over a dozen, prompting law enforcement to allocate more resources to the case. The Green River Task Force was formed, with seasoned detectives like Dave Reichert leading the charge. The investigation was grueling, involving hundreds of leads, interviews, and mounting public scrutiny. In a bizarre twist, infamous serial killer Ted Bundy offered his insights to the task force while awaiting execution in Florida. Bundy suggested that the Green River Killer likely revisited his crime scenes and engaged in necrophilic acts, a theory that proved accurate. For nearly 2 decades, Ridgway evaded capture. It wasn't until the late 1990s that advancements in DNA technology provided a breakthrough. Evidence from several crime scenes was reanalyzed, and in 2001, DNA linked Ridgway to the murders of 4 women. The Green River Task Force had finally identified their suspect. Ridgway was arrested on November 30, 2001, while leaving the truck factory where he had worked for over 30 years. The mild-mannered man who attended church and held a steady job was unmasked as one of America's most prolific serial killers. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Ridgway confessed to murdering 49 women, though he claimed the real number was closer to 80. He showed no remorse, describing his victims as objects and his murders as his career. His cooperation with investigators, including leading them to additional bodies, spared him the death penalty. In 2003, Ridgway accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He pled guilty to 48 counts of aggravated murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trial brought closure to many families, but the pain and trauma lingered. During victim impact statements, several family members expressed their grief, while others forgave Ridgway, hoping to find peace. Ridgway's crimes left an indelible mark on American society, prompting changes in how law enforcement handles serial murder investigations. His case highlighted the vulnerability of marginalized communities and the importance of technological advancements in solving crimes. Experts have described Ridgway as a textbook psychopath, driven by a need for control and a lack of empathy. His calm demeanor and ability to blend into society made him particularly dangerous. Ridgway's hatred for women, particularly sex workers, stemmed from his troubled relationship with his mother. His killings provided a twisted sense of power and gratification. Gary Ridgway's story is a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most ordinary facades. His ability to evade capture for decades exposed the flaws in early investigative techniques, while his eventual arrest demonstrated the power of persistence and innovation in law enforcement. As we reflect on his horrific crimes, we honor the lives of his victims and the lessons learned to prevent such atrocities in the future. Dear Mrs. Budd, I am writing to you to let you know how your daughter died. The words were cruel and calculated, written by a man who would become known as one of the most depraved serial killers in American history. The letter was sent anonymously to Delia Budd in 1934, detailing in gruesome fashion how her 10-year-old daughter, Grace Budd, had been lured away, murdered, and cannibalized by a seemingly harmless old man. Albert Fish, a gaunt and frail figure with gray hair and an air of meekness, did not look like a monster. But behind his unassuming exterior was a man consumed by unspeakable desires. A predator who preyed on children, a sadomasochist who inflicted pain upon himself as much as others, and a cannibal who terrorized New York City in the early 20th century. This is the story of Albert Fish, the gray man, the boogeyman, and the embodiment of pure evil. Albert Fish was born on May 19, 1870, in Washington, D.C., into a family plagued by mental illness. His father, Randall Fish, was 75 years old at the time of Albert's birth, and his mother, Ellen Fish, was significantly younger but burdened by poverty. Albert's childhood was defined by neglect and trauma. When his father died in 1875, his mother was unable to care for him and sent him to St. John's Orphanage. It was here that the seeds of Albert's depravity were sown. At the orphanage, Albert was subjected to routine beatings and humiliations. He would later admit that he began to derive pleasure from the pain inflicted upon him, a twisted association that would follow him for the rest of his life. I was there until I was nearly 9, and that's where I got started wrong. We were whipped all the time. I saw boys doing things they shouldn't have been doing. Albert reunited with his mother at age 10, but the damage had already been done. His teenage years were marked by strange and disturbing behavior. He began experimenting with self-harm, driving needles into his body, and setting himself up for pain as a form of gratification. At 20, Fish moved to New York City and began working as a house painter. Outwardly, he appeared normal, even friendly. But beneath this facade was a man whose perverse desires grew stronger with each passing year. He married and fathered 6 children, maintaining the appearance of a family man. However, his life behind closed doors was anything but normal. Fish subjected himself to bizarre rituals of self-torture, whipping himself with nail-studded paddles and inserting needles into his groin and abdomen. Albert Fish was a man of contradictions, a devoted father by day and a sadistic predator by night. By the 1920s, Fish's deviance had escalated to horrifying extremes. He began preying on young children, often those from poor families, whom he believed wouldn't be missed. He would lure them away with promises of candy or money, taking them to isolated locations where he subjected them to unimaginable horrors. Fish referred to himself as the Gray Man due to his ability to blend into his surroundings. He appeared harmless, even pitiable, a frail, elderly man with kind eyes. But this guise made him all the more dangerous. The crime that would forever cement Albert Fish's place in infamy occurred on May 28, 1928. Fish answered an ad placed by Edward Budd, an 18-year-old seeking work. Fish visited the Budd family home, posing as a man named Frank Howard, who was interested in hiring Edward. It was during this visit that Fish noticed Grace Budd, Edward's 10-year-old sister. He shifted his plans entirely. Fish convinced the family to let him take Grace to a birthday party, promising to return her later that evening. Grace Budd was never seen alive again. 6 years later, Delia Budd received the infamous letter in which Fish described in gruesome detail how he had murdered and eaten Grace. The letter to Delia Budd contained enough identifying details for the police to track Fish down. He was arrested in December 1934. During his confession, Fish described not only the murder of Grace Budd, but also other atrocities he had committed. He admitted to kidnapping, torturing, and killing several children over the years. His confessions were so disturbing that even seasoned detectives were left shaken. I've seen some things in my time, but nothing like this, nothing this evil. Fish's trial began in March 1935 and quickly became a media sensation. The public was horrified by the details of his crimes, but they were also morbidly fascinated. Fish's defense team argued that he was insane, citing his self-mutilation, cannibalism, and history of mental illness as evidence. However, the jury found Fish guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death by electrocution. On January 16, 1936, Albert Fish was executed at Sing Sing prison. His last words reportedly were, "I don't even know why I'm here." Fish's crimes left an indelible mark on American history, not only for their brutality, but also for the way they exposed the darkest corners of human nature. Albert Fish's life and crimes force us to grapple with difficult questions about the nature of evil. Was he a product of his traumatic upbringing, or was his depravity something deeper, something innate? Perhaps we will never fully understand what drove Albert Fish to commit such heinous acts. But one thing remains clear. His story is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most unassuming faces. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you're craving more spine-tingling stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support keeps these haunting tales alive. Thank you.